Good evening, everybody. We're pressing on, Bezrat Hashem, with our exploration of Mesilas Yesharim, the path of the just. Finding your path, we're in Perek Tes, chapter 9. We're dealing with the midah, the character trait of zezrizut, of alacrity, and specifically dealing with those things that separate a person, distance a person from the midah of alacrity. We got about halfway through last time, a bit more than halfway through, and I'm going to start from where it says "Haklal lahavchin bein shtei hayira'os." Do you see that? And the principle, the discerning principle, how can a person discern between these two kinds of fears? Now, what are we talking about? There is an appropriate fear. When a person is scared that something might happen to him, it's a mitzvah d'oraisa v'nishmatim nafshoseichem ma'od. A person has to be extremely careful of anything that might damage him, whether that's, God forbid, a terrorist attack or something which is dangerous in his house, a broken window, a broken stairway. He has to be very careful when it comes to that. But there's another kind of fear, which is a fear which is inappropriate, where in point of fact, it's the Yetzer Hara just prompting a person to come up with excuses. So how does one know which fear is speaking to you? And let's understand, therefore, the principle which discerns this. V'haklal, the general principle, lahavchin bein shtei hayira'os, these two kinds of fears, who is ma'ashechilka chacham zichron l'bracha, the distinction that our sages made, and when they said ba'omram ben psochim is daf ches, the Talmud, the Gemara in Psochim, page 8 on the base. So there's a principle called heicha de shchiach hazeka shiny, where where the shchiach hazeka damage is commonplace, so that's different. In other words, we're talking here about a person. There's a general principle that shluchei mitzvah eino nezokin. Somebody who's being sent or is going to do a mitzvah, he has the protection of the mitzvah. But this does not apply in situations, that only applies in situations where danger is not something which is usual. Meaning if a person gets on the, let's say the light rail in Yerushalayim to go downtown to get his tefillin checked in the tefillin macha, that's something where he has a protection there against anything that might happen, God forbid a terrorist attack. But if a person is going to, walk through, I don't know, the old city of the Arab quarter of Jerusalem, or Hebron, or Yericho, wearing his tefillin and saying, well, I'm not going to get hurt because I got my tefillin on, so he may not get hurt, but that suddenly can't rely on the shmira, the guarding of the mitzvah, because we only say that shluchei mitzvah eino nezokin, someone who's sent to do a mitzvah is not damaged, only where the hazeka, the damage, is not shchiach, but heicha de shchiach hazeka shiny, where damage is prevalent, where it's a dangerous place, you cannot and you're not allowed to. And it's an issa, d'oraisa, to rely on that kind of shmira, that kind of guarding. Some a place where damage is commonplace and known, yesh l'shomer, a person has to be careful. But in a place where damage is not known about, ein lira, a person, there's no reason to fear. And Chazal also point out the similar idea in another expression which goes, Re'usa de lo chazinon lo machzikinon. A re'usa, a problem. A re'usa means like a problem, something which is, for example, you assume that a mikveh it has 40 saw. If the last time that it was checked, it had the 40 saw and it's a kosher mikveh. If there's nothing there which would prompt you to think that the status quo has changed, we don't assume something's changed. So re'usa de lo chazinon, a problem that we're not aware of, we don't see, we don't take that into account. We don't hold by that. And a wise person should only take into account that which his eyes see. Huatzmo inyan apasuk shehevenu lamala. This is exactly what we were talking about before in the pasuk that we brought Orum ra ra'a v'nista. Orum, literally orum means naked, but somebody who's got his eyes peeled have a similar kind of how do you expression in English? Your eyes are peeled. Do they say that in America? Just in England, okay. So in England, I have an expression: keep your eyes peeled. I mean, meaning literally that if you see something that's a problem, keep your eyes peeled, look out, and if you see a danger, so you should hide from it. Here we're only talking about a person taking refuge from a danger which he sees. We're not talking about something that it's possible, it's feasible that it might happen. This is exactly what the pasuk that we said before, talking about how a lazy person will find all ways of justifying his laziness. So a lazy person will say, I can't go outside because there's a lion. Maybe there's a lion outside. They explain the matter, sages, and say, you see how far a person the fear of empty things can go to separate a person from doing something good. How far this stupidity really is. Because as it says, Shlomo HaMelech says, Shiva Devraim Amar Shlomo Be'etzel. Shlomo HaMelech said 7 things about a lazy person. Ketzad. So Amru Lo Etzel, they said to this lazy person, Hare Rabcha Be'ir, your rabbi is in town, Lech Ulamad Torah Mimenu, go learn Torah from him. For who Meishiv Oisam, and he answered them and he said, I'm scared that maybe there's a lion on the way to my rabbi, so I'm not going to go. So then they say, okay, Rabbacha B'tocha Medina, your rabbi is actually not just in town, he's in the neighborhood. He's in absolute right, he's here in the neighborhood. Now here the word in Hebrew, Medina, doesn't mean as it does nowadays in the state, because a state nowadays is larger than a town. Here it means the locale. So Omer Lehem, he says, oh no. I'm worried that maybe there's a lion in the alleyways. Amrulo, so they said to him, Arehu b'soch beisacha. Your rabbi is in your house. Omer Lehem, so he said to them, if I go and try, I'm going to find the door's going to be locked. It gets more and more stupid. Amrulo, so they tell him, we know for a fact that it's open. Now at this point, of course, he's got nothing left to answer. So what does he say? Omer Lehem, sorry, I lost the place. Omer Lehem hadeles pasucha. Sorry. Omer Lehem, well, hadeles pasucha o ne'ula. Whether the door's open or locked. Mevakesh ani lishon od ma'at. I want to sleep a little bit more. Ha l'madat she'ein hayira goremes. She is atzel. It's not that fear causes laziness. Ella atzala goremes la she is roy. That the laziness provokes a person to come up with all these kinds of irrational, improbable fears. And that's how you can tell the difference. V'chol devarim ha'ela, many things like this, and nisoyan hayomi yo'er lehem, daily experience testifies to the truth of this. V'masha kavash poshudu, v'rogil v'rov hamon b'nei ha'odam asher zeh daracham kesel lomoy. That it's in Tehillim. This is the way of a lazy person to speak like this. Umaskil al davar shemotze emes la'amito v'das lanovo lanokel. So a person who's intelligent will understand the truth of this, and he will extrapolate. He will understand, and he'll easily understand the difference between these two things, between an appropriate fear and an inappropriate fear. Ukavan is bari inyan zezrizut bia she'echshov hayosoi maspik leheras alev. And I think I've dealt this with, says the Ramchal, enough to awaken a person to this situation. And the wise person will take these examples and extrapolate them and look in his own life to see where this prompting of the Yetzer Hara to laziness through inappropriate and unrealistic fears or other reasons that he comes up which are not really based in reality. V'hinei roe ki hu real zezrizut lios b'madrega acha zehirus. Now he's finishing off here and he says, it's fitting, if you remember we started off, you can see now that it's appropriate that zezrizut, alacrity, is a level after zehirus, is a level after watchfulness, being careful. In other words, it's appropriate to learn first of all that a person has to guard himself from transgressing negative mitzvahs and move on to the next stage of then being alacritous, speedy to perform the mitzvahs and to complete them. That's the second level. Kil al rov, because most people, lo yeh adam zoriz im lo yeh zahir batchila. Most people are not going to be speedy, alacritous, and rush to do mitzvahs if they haven't already achieved the level of watchfulness and care when it comes to mitzvahs lo saseh. Now I want to come back to this point because there's a bit of a contradictions here. Because as we said before, and in fact the Mesilas Yesharim pointed this out, achrei pa'ulos nimshechim alavavos. We said before that after the actions is drawn the heart. That we said that a person who is naturally lazy should run to do everything during the day that he would normally, even things that he wants to do. He should run to the lunchroom at lunchtime, because a person can inculcate into himself a midah by performing that midah, and the action then infiltrates itself into his heart, into his brain, and to his character traits. So it seems to be that he's saying over here that the alacrity and the doing of positive mitzvahs is really only going to work after the separating oneself from doing averos, from doing sins. And as I said before, we have this principle, achrei pa'ulos nimshechim alavavos, that if you want to do good, if you want to be drawn to do good things, you should do the good things, that the heart is drawn after the actions. And therefore, when a person does positive actions, positive mitzvahs, he serves Hashem, this automatically leads him to be watchful and careful, and his heart is drawn towards the service of Hashem. So that's a contradiction we're going to have to deal with, because he seems to be saying the reverse here, that a person first of all has to fix up his watchfulness, make sure he's not doing the wrong thing before he can do the right thing. So let's go first of all and see how he plays out. He finishes off this idea. Ki mi shelo yosim libo lezaher b'masov u'lizboinen ba'avoda u'mishpotea shezu hi midas hazehirus kama shechasavti kosher sheyilbash ava v'chemda alea u'yizdorez b'tshuka lifnei boro ki hinei hu odenu tovea b'tavas hagufonis v'rotz merutzas hergoloi me'ariko mikol zeh. So, as we said before, as I wrote, he said, it's going to be difficult for somebody to yilbash, an interesting phrase, literally to clothe himself. We have the expression in English, it comes from the Hebrew, to cloak himself with the love and the desire of doing mitzvahs, and to be speedy and alacritous with his tshuka. He can stimulate his desire to do the positive mitzvahs in front of Hashem, because he's still wallowing tovea in his physical desires, and he's running the merutzas hergolo. He's running in the normal habituation that he's habituated himself as a result of being accustoming himself to, as we said, a person who wants to serve Hashem, he has to make do with what comes to his hand. He can't expect to have all his physical desires, complete and perfect to the bottom to the final T, the crossed T's and the dotted I's and the four-course meals. And as we said in last week's shir, that a person has to make himself arai, not fixed, and the Torah has to be the fixed thing in his life, and he has to form his life and shape his life around the Torah and mitzvahs, and fit his life, his physical life into that. So a person who's still steeped in his physical desires, and he's still habituated to follow these desires, which distance him from all of the avodas Hashem and the desire to do mitzvahs, he will find it very difficult to be a zoriz, somebody who rushes to do mitzvahs. Once his eyes have been opened, liros ma'asov, to see his actions, ulizoya mahem, and to be careful about the meaning, to guard himself from doing sins, mitzvahs lo saseh, being over a mitzvahs lo saseh, v'cheshbono ha-mitzvahs, and making the calculation that we spoke about before, the schar mitzvah against its loss, the reward for the mitzvah against its loss. The loss is, it might cost you money, it might cost you sleep, it might cost you physical exertion. But the reward for that, which is an eternal reward, and also the other way around, the schar aveira, the reward for an aveira, which is of course the momentary physical pleasure, and compare that with its loss, which is the loss of his olam haba, loss of his portion in the world to come, as we mentioned above. So then, nokelhu, it'll be easy for him, shiasur min hara, to turn away from the evil, vishtokek el hatov, and to desire the good, v'yizdares boy, and to speed himself up, to be alacritus in its pursuit and its action, v'zeh pashut, and that's obvious. So let's come back to our question. On the one hand, we've got this idea that, as he says in this parak here, that a person first of all has to have the level of zehirus in order that he can reach the level of alacrity and desire to do mitzvahs. Even though we said that there is a contrary principle, or a principle which we really understand how this fits in, to say that achrei pa'ulos nimshechim elavavos, that the heart is drawn after the actions, and it sounds like actions is something that you can. Those actions can be done in a certain way, in in a rather cold or detached fashion, even without the enthusiasm. So the answer is that both are true. That a person will find himself stimulated to do a mitzvah by the physical action itself. And the reason is that a physical action, doing a mitzvah, acharei pa'ulos nimshechim elavavos, when a person does a mitzvah, he's literally surrounded by kedusha, by holiness. Every mitzvah is a ner mitzvah v'torah or. Every mitzvah is a minute, not minute, is a part of that great light which is the Torah. And so when he does a mitzvah, he's surrounded literally by an ora makif, a light which surrounds him, which of course, so to speak, radiates his body with a degree of kedusha. The more he does something, therefore, the more he will feel the desire to do that. But what he's talking about here, that the reverse principle is also true. That if a person sits down and he understands intellectually why he should be doing mitzvahs, what he's going to gain, and what he's going to lose, those also will intellectually draw him to want to be a zohar, to be careful not to do aveiros. And of course, the mere fact of not doing aveiros has the corresponding action of bringing a kedusha to a person. Because the worst thing that a person can do is he's habitually involved in aveiros. So what happens is that he's sunk, quite literally. He's wallowing in something which blinds his eyes and blinds his heart, and puts something which is called timtum alev, a constriction around the heart. Very often people say, well, I don't feel it. And the reason they don't feel it is because they don't do it. And if a person would keep himself away from doing aveiros, every aveira is like a shield in the light. It's like the windscreen of a person's spiritual vision. He's driving along with a dirty windscreen. He can't see out. The light is there, but he's not going to see the light because his windscreen is thoroughly besmirched and full of mud. and the mud is coming from his actions. He's creating this obstruction between him and the light of the mitzvah. So a person has to understand how bad, as he says, we learned in previous chapters, what an Aveira does. It obstructs the eyes. It causes this thing called timtum alev. Specifically, by the way, keeping kosher is a tremendous help when a person wants to feel closer to Hashem, because it's a pasuk in the Torah. It says, "Unatamtem, you should become tomei. V'nismesim, you'll become tomei. Unatamtem is a lotion of tumtum, of sealed. That a person, when he eats, he becomes the non-kosher food, puts an orla salev, an obstruction around the heart, that he doesn't feel this connection to Hashem. He feels mitzvahs are difficult. So a person, if he's feeling like this, one of the things he could examine is to see whether, he's to check the kashrus and to be more careful, let's say, with the Yesharim that he uses. And so the answer to this question is that both are true. Intellectually, a person has to understand how bad it is to do an Aveira, how this distances himself from Hashem. And he has to understand that because he doesn't understand what's going on, because he's so immersed in his physicality, he can't see out of it. And he has to use his mind to yank himself out of this to appeal to his reason. Man was given a seichel, was given a brain to understand, look what you're doing to yourself. This is really what this book is all about. It's about using your brain to understand what an Aveira can do and what a mitzvah can do, and how bad an Aveira is, and what a mitzvah staying away from that Aveira helps to keep a person in a state where he's fit to receive the positive mitzvahs, the light of those positive mitzvahs when he does them. And of course, there's a schar, there's a reward in itself for staying away from the Aveiras. Of course, it's very difficult because, as he says, a person is in a state of hergel, of habituation. But a person has a brain. We're not animals. A person has a brain, and a person, as we've said many times, has to sit down. He has to analyze his actions. Of course, especially now between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, this is a time which is perfect. A person can cry out to Hashem, Hashem, open my eyes. Most of the time, a lot of the time anyway, we go through our lives and we justify. We're very good at being our own defense lawyers, why we do this and why we do that. But if a person really sits down and he thinks honestly, and he davens for Hashem's help to open up his eyes to the things that he's fooling himself about, to let me see the things, Hashem, that I need to do tshuva for. Because it's very difficult sometimes to separate those two out. It's interesting that the avodah of Yom Kippur, and maybe we'll close with this, the avodah of Yom Kippur has two identical goats. They have to be exactly the same, as much as physically possible. They have to be worth the same height, the same color. They have to be physically indistinguishable, one from the other. One goes on the mizbeach, one is the Yetzer Tov, and the other one is cast out, is what they call in English the scapegoat, sent out into the desert and suffers an ignominious death by being thrown off a very high point to its death, its bones crushed. That's the Yetzer Hara. Now, those two are identical. The biggest difficulty is that Yetzer Hara tries to want to take you over like a body snatcher. He wants to say, I'm really you. This is really who you are. This is really who you are. And what you're doing is that's you. There's no way you can escape from that. That's who you are. And so the Yetzer Tov has to say to the Yetzer Hara, no, that's not me. And a person needs tremendous siyat dishmaya to be able to understand who he really is, that he really is, inside him is this holy spark, and the Yetzer Hara will try very, very hard to convince him that he is the real me. And so in this time before Rosh Hashanah, before Yom Kippur, we wish to make our efforts in this way to daven very hard and to cry out to Hashem. Hashem, B'himotzu, is now close to every person. Usually any other time of the year, prayers are only definitely answered when a tzibur, when a congregation prays together. But this is a time of year where even every individual can cry out to Hashem and say, Hashem, help me. Whatever help I need, I feel very lost. I feel very far away from you. I don't know how to get back to you. I feel everything I do is not going to be enough, I feel inadequate. All of these feelings a person should express to Hashem, and Hashem will help. Hashem will help. And Hashem should bless us all with a good, peaceful year, that we should see all of our brothers and sisters who are held in captive should be returned safely to freedom and to their families. And we should see B'ezrat Hashem very soon the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu. A wonderful, good new year. Gemar Chasim Tova.